You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Allan Weitz.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. Today, we have two guests, photographer Stephen Wilkes and his wife and business manager, Bette Wilkes. Stephen is a photographer whose work I have long admired both aesthetically and technically. His photographs are included in the collections of the George Eastman Museum, the James A. Michener Art Museum, the Houston Museum of Arts, the Dow Jones Collection, the Griffin Museum of Photography, the Jewish Museum of New York, the Library of Congress, the Museum of the City of New York, the 9/11 Memorial Museum, and numerous private collections. His editorial work has appeared in and on the covers of New York Times Magazine, Vanity Fair, Time, Fortune, National Geographic, Sports Illustrated, etc. His fine art work is also represented in New York City by the Bryce Walkowitz Gallery. Welcome. Nice to have you guys here.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Today's topic is a series of photographs that you guys have been working on called Day to Night. And it is ambitious to say the least. Just a fast intro. They're not time lapse, they're not time exposures, but they are a record of an entire day's activity in one location,
Correct.
Summarized in one photograph. And it is still a photograph, even though it's a collage, montage, however you want to describe it. But it's one photograph that takes in day to night, and it's amazing. Bette, you are the mechanism that makes all of this happen in this relationship. What are the seeds of this particular project? Where did it start, and what was the first photograph that you did in this series?
Well, the first photograph was the High Line, and Stephen was asked to shoot that by the photo editor at New York Magazine, Jody Kwan. Mm-hmm. And she came to him, and we sit in our offices with our back to each other, and I hear him talking to her on the phone saying, God, Jody, I love the High Line during the day, but I also love it at night. What about if I did a picture for you where I shot north to south and combined day to night in one photograph? And I'm listening to him, and he's going, I don't know. And he says, but I'm going to figure it out. And he hangs up, and I turn around and I say, how are you going to do that? He goes, I don't know, but I am going to figure it out.
But
and
were you immediately thinking production as soon as he asked that?
I was immediately thinking, oh my God, what are we going to do here? How am I going to get him permission to be where he wants to be?
Is it fair to say you already had this stuff bubbling in your head for a while? Because you don't just volunteer to do something like that unless you got something cooking back there.
I think it's funny. First of all, I could never even come up with that idea if I didn't have my wife, Bette, who's just such an amazing partner in terms of she takes care of so many of the aspects of the business that allow me to sort of float like that creatively, and that's a huge thing.
You
it's
have
a great gift, no question about it. So yeah, I get to float, and sometimes when I float, things like this happen where I get this intersection, and for me it was a thing that happened when I was years ago, 16 years ago, when I did a photograph for Life magazine of Baz Luhrmann's film Romeo and Juliet. And it was there where the idea or the concept of actually creating time change in an image sort of jumped out at me. I was asked to do a panoramic photograph of the set of the film with all the cast and crew, and it was essentially I was paying homage to the old big pictures that Life magazine used to do. Mm-hmm. And when I got to Mexico to do this photograph, and I'm all set to do a big wide picture, the set is a square. And I'm like, how am I going to make a 3-page gatefold out of a square? And at the time, David Hockney was doing this really exciting the photo collage technique where he's shooting multiple images and then pasting them together. And I was inspired by that. And I thought, wait a second, I could kind of do that kind of an idea. I could, instead of taking one picture, I'll take like 250 images of the entire set. And I essentially took the square and I opened it into a panoramic shape. And in the process of making that photograph, I had Claire Danes and Leonardo in the center of the photograph, and I had them embracing as Romeo and Juliet. And you see everybody, the cast and crew's behind them. And then as I panned my camera and started taking multiple images, there was a huge mirror, literally on the set. And in that mirror, you could see a perfect reflection of Claire and Leonardo and the cast and crew as well. And I asked just for that one photograph. I said, could everybody stay exactly as you are, except Claire and Leonardo? I want you guys to kiss for this one photograph. And then I came back to New York and I put this thing together over like 7 days. I have such respect for Hockney. I never want to do that again. But I actually looked at the finished composite images, this collage I'd created, and I changed time. I had them embracing in the center, and in the reflection they were kissing. And that idea of actually changing time in a photograph is where that actually was seeded. And I just, again, never wanted to do a giant collage like that again, but suddenly this advent of Photoshop and the idea of technology allows me really now to sort of take that idea and that concept, that dream in a way, and bring it to reality in a seamless way.
That image you shot on film or in?
That was all shot film.
That was all shot
film.
Yeah.
It
Color
was like
print film.
5-7-inch prints, just all laid out.
I was
on
shooting,
it.
it was a 6x7 format, and I just literally shot hundreds of images, and then I got giant contact sheets made, and I hand cut them myself. And I actually have the test that I did. I did it initially with a Polaroid to see if it could even work conceptually, and did that. But it was one of those things. That's, to me, what's interesting is how ideas sort of evolve. And even though that was so many years ago when I did that. Suddenly I got this assignment, and I started to look at the High Line and realized it was really my frustration in the fact that I loved it both times a day and couldn't decide which one I liked better. And so by sheer the force of like nature, I just figured, well, wait a second, why can't I do both? And that's kind of where it came from. Yeah.
Okay, so you say, okay, I'm doing it. You hang up the phone, and you're sitting there back to back, and you're saying, okay, now what am I doing? So what'd you do?
Well, this first one, the High Line, was less production heavy than many of the others, only because we were so naive about what we were doing. Stephen went out, he scouted it, and funny enough,
you wouldn't have taken the assignment if you knew it was involved. Naivety is sometimes a blessing.
Yes. But the crazy thing is, and I don't know if you remember this anecdote, but the crazy thing is one of the guys that owned one of the buildings that he wanted to shoot from ended up to be one of his collectors. At the time, that didn't exist, but further on down the road, which
when I wanted to shoot from his rooftop, it was like, no, I don't really want you. And then he ends up becoming a collector of my work, which is really funny. Yeah.
It's okay, let them refuse every time like that. That's okay.
But so for that one, we have a long-standing relationship with one of the equipment companies up in Mount Vernon, who knows Stephen loves to shoot from, a great big lift. And I called him and I said, what do you got? What's going to fit? And they're like, okay. But I said, but Sam, we need it for, about 24 hours. He's like, what? I'm like, yeah. So this particular lift truck wasn't, your favorite truck.
Yeah, it wasn't my 170-foot Condor. That's my preferred choice.
So we didn't have such a hard time clearing it.
I prefer
You said you didn't want to talk gear. Now you're talking
Now I'm talking gear. This is... I actually really want one of those. I want to put like a toilet in one. I want to have like a cappuccino machine.
You're there for 36 hours.
36 hours.
I like this guy.
So from my perspective, this one wasn't as challenging because I was able to get the permission. The streets, at that time, the High Line was still under construction. There wasn't a big problem getting my permit.
Tourists didn't discover it yet.
Yeah, it wasn't that big a deal. But when we moved on to the Flatiron, that became a huge production. And that happened because some months before, we were on assignment in Times Square photographing the Jumbotron there. Is it the Jumbotron? Am I saying it right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it was for a particular client, and we had the 170-foot Condor out there, and he's up, 70 feet in the air shooting. Everything's going great, and all of a sudden, this big black car shows up, and it's the executive director of the mayor's film and broadcasting office, and he says to me, "What are you doing?" And it was freezing out, so I was sitting in the car, and I said, "I have my permit." He said, "If I could pull you out by your hair right now, I would. It's a vaulted sidewalk. He's going to fall right through." And I was like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yes." And I said, "Well, we've been here before. We've done this before." He's like, "Let me see." So he goes around and he looks around, and it ended up that we really hit it off. We got the shot. We became friends through the whole thing. He said,
"Is he also a collector now?"
Sort of. His wife has one of our pieces. This is the Flatiron pieces, actually, and he saw that we were really serious about what we were doing, and I was able to work it all out with him. And so I went back to him and I said, "Look, we want to do the Flatiron," and he said, "You know what? We're not doing this without the DOT." he said, meet me downtown. It'll be me and the DOT, and we got to walk through this, and we got to walk it off and see if it's really feasible.
From the Highline shot, which was an assignment from a magazine,
Right.
Did they continue in that fashion as assignments? And then what's the time frame we're talking about from the Highline to Times Square and then to Flatiron? And when did you know it was going to be more than just one shot? And
Well, what happened was they came to us, New York Magazine again came to me and Jody and said, and this is kind of a funny story too. Our son had got accepted to NYU, and so we were going for one of those briefings, and we were up at top of the Kimmel Center, and when I get sort of visually enchanted by something, it's as if the entire world turns off. So I have no focus other than what I'm looking at.
It was the parent orientation.
Yes, yeah, the parent orientation. So Betty is like,
And Betty's the parent, right?
Betty's the parent, and I'm looking out the window, and
they
going,
separate you, so
oh
the
my
kids
God.
go in one room and the parents go in the
going,
other.
And he's with the kids.
I'm looking at
And
this
he's like-
view of Washington Square Park, and I've never seen this view before, and I'm like, this is so
it
incredible.
is a great. I've been up there.
And and Betty's like, why aren't you listening? Why aren't you listening? And so we walk out of literally this meeting, and my phone rings, and it's Jody, and she says, we want you to do another one of those day to night things. How about vertical? Could you do a vertical one? And I'm like going, boy, do I have the location. And that's how Washington Square literally happened. I walked out of the building, I got a phone call, and that's how the second one evolved. And I think then the second one we showed actually at the APAD photography show. And I think we both of us never saw a reaction to any of my photographs like that picture sort of drove. And it was at that moment that I kind of realized I'd really kind of stepped into something, and we began to really talk about creating a body of work on New York with this concept and this idea. And that's kind of
So it started with
without
New
going
York.
off too far on
yeah.
the side, I have to say that there are many, many amazing photographs in this world, especially these days when everyone's taking pictures. But what's unique about this series of pictures is that you have to stop and look at them because it's more than just a pretty picture or an amazing image. It's something that, as you're looking at it, you realize that there's no way you can see this in any other form except in this photograph.
Exactly.
But
It doesn't
It's
exist.
a really new way. For me, it's what's exciting about it is, and I think one of the things that happened to me personally, one of the drivers to create this idea was, at 2000, in the year 2000, everybody was talking about like film was going to become the dominant visual idea that we'd all look at. That was going to be the form. That still photography was somehow going to be, go the way of the Gutenberg Bible or something. It was just like it was going to be commoditized.
Photography's dead.
Yeah,
Right.
photography's kind of dead, and that was and people were actually saying it. That video is it. Everything's video. We see in video. We dream in video. It's all video. And I took such offense to that because I felt like, wait a second, we have this digital technology now. It's a whole new way of thinking, and I started to realize that I wanted to sort of create something photographically that show in a way that this is just the beginning of where still photography can go, that there's a whole new, with these new tools, we're not limited to a single image anymore, a single moment. Why does it have to be that way? Photography's always been an evolution, and that's kind of the way I've always thought about it. And
Now, that said, these photographs, each individual photograph contains up to 2,000 elements from 2,000 photographs. Is that correct or no?
Well, no, I will shoot anywhere from 1,200 to 2,200 images to do one day to night. And it's what's important to note is you said it's not a time lapse. This is me hand-cocking a traditional large format lens and taking 2,200 single photographs, moments that I see with my eye, right? So it's all done in the most traditional of manners. What's different is I'm capturing the image in a very high resolution digital back, and then it's what we do on the back end, and the combination of the way I photograph and the way we put the image together in post allows me to really, and you, the viewer, to experience what was essentially my memory of that day.
And he edits the 2,200 or the 1,500
Into 50
images
select.
Into,
on average,
usually
about
on
50.
average.
Yeah.
Now, you also mentioned that you start off one of the images you have to have, one of your base images, I believe you described, There's no people in it. It has to be empty.
Yeah, what we try
How
to
do
do
you
is
do that?
it's called a
Sometimes.
it's called a we call it, I describe it as what I call a naked plate based on
Yes,
time.
okay.
So what I do is I as I photograph, for every moment you see in my photographs, I have moments where I consciously don't have any people in that area. So I'm trying to, in my mind, I'm creating a naked plate. So people say to me, how do you even pay attention for 36 hours, let alone, like, you can't watch TV. Most people can't watch TV for more than 5 hours, you know? So, but I'm hyper-focused in this thing, and it's because it's literally a real-time puzzle that's going on in my mind as I photograph. So I'm not only seeing what's in front of me based as time changes, my eye moves as time changes, but I'm also thinking about, do I have that naked plate? Do I have a piece where no people are in that part of the area? Do I have the sky? Can I transition? Where are the transitions happening? Do I have, when I'm shooting crowd shots, I'm actually waiting, people, I'm not only just getting the moment, I get the moment when the actual crowd breaks, and so it's literally like that type of thing. I'm almost like a surgeon, hyper-focused on all of the elements that I need, because I know in the end, if I don't have those elements, we can't really execute this.
How are
in
you
post.
keeping track of all? Because these are amazingly complex pictures that take in a wide field of view, wide angle of view. And as you're up there for a day, literally, and
Sometimes
you're watching,
more.
or sometimes more.
More.
How do you keep track of all of these? Do you know that you have like this lower quadrant clear of people? Or, are you taking notes, or is it just all in your head?
It's all in my head. I don't talk to anybody except my assistant. I keep my assistant.
And he marks the moment.
And he marks them. We have a very elaborate, it's a combination of a color system and, a number system that allows me, based on time, to know exactly where I am at any given moment. And the beautiful thing about what I do is, I shoot for 18 hours, but when I edit, it's all based on time, right? So I kind of know where I am. Depending on where I start my edit. You can literally, with my work, you can sort of sit and just cruise through, keep the space bar down and just fly through all the images, and you can actually see time change in my photo. Right. So that's what I'm doing. But my eye is moving as time moves. So the critical element in this whole thing is I have to really decide where day begins and night ends. And that's what I call a time vector. And in my photographs, if you look closely, my vector can go on an x-axis, a y-axis, or even a z-axis. And so essentially I'm really taking the concept of the space-time continuum, what Einstein described, right, as a fabric, what time is, and how this fabric gets warped by gravity. I take the fabric of time. That's why I see time as a grid as well, and a fabric, except I flatten it onto a two-dimensional single piece, of film.
And these ideas that you're discussing, and even the process, at what stage did these ideas come to you? Was this there as a seed from the beginning, or are these ideas that you developed over these 15 years?
The exploration of like the space-time continuum actually happened. I had done a few of these, and I was reading the book on Einstein, and when the word fabric was brought up in the book, I suddenly had this light went on in my head, because I see time as a grid like that, like a fabric.
Wrinkle in time.
A wrinkle in time. Yeah. So I was almost, in a strange way, intuitively just seeing it that way. I was seeing time that way in my photographs. And then as I started to evolve the work and explore this idea of a time vector, I started to realize that if I could move time not only on one axis, but on two axes, and in fact 3 axis points, suddenly I could change your perception of depth in a photograph. And what I describe as what's most interesting, I think, is the color of light in my photographs. When you look at the color in my pictures, people come into galleries and my shows, and they look at the images and they go, "Wow, what's he doing with the color?" I'm not doing anything with the color. You're seeing the color of light change over a 12-hour period in a single photograph. And so our brains are wired where if we're in this room now and we turn on a red light and there's no other light on, after about 5 or 10 minutes, Allan, you're going to look neutral to me. You're not going to look red.
We have auto-white balance.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
It's really what it is.
That's what it is.
We neutralize it.
We neutralize everything. You can't go neutral in my photographs. So in a way, color, for me, in my photographs, the color of light becomes almost like a musical score in a film. It adds I've discovered that there's a real powerful narrative in the ability to change the color of light over time.
And there's so many questions.
You tell me.
I wanted to jump back just to mention one thing, and you talked about music, but and you talked about viewing the photos. I have viewed these photos like I view a painting at times, like a large landscape, but even more so some of the old masters where you're taking a quadrant and looking at it and then checking out another aspect and then trying to put them all together. I look at it differently than I do most photos.
Well, that's quite interesting because thank you. I see that's one of the most exciting aspects of where we can go now as photographers, is that there's always was a great envy what a painter could do, right? Because a painter could interpret, could bring, and photography was this very accurate representation. What
you can't fix reality.
You can't fix reality. But now what I'm able to do, and if you look at, I'm a student of painting and art history, and as I started to evolve my work, and one of my first inspirations was Jan Bruegel the Elder, and he really established for me. If you look at my day-to-night work, you can see the scale of Bruegel in my photographs. There's this concept of being able to actually see and feel the stories. One of the paintings that struck me when I was 14, I went to the museum, the Metropolitan, for the first time, and I remember seeing the harvesters for the first time, and it just changed my life. I never saw a landscape like that. And I remember walking up to the painting and actually just looking at all the stories that were going on within this painting. And it was so nuanced, and yet even though I was capturing this entire breadth of the scene, I could still feel almost the sweat coming off the brow of these individual guys working in this field. There was a powerful narrative that was happening within the context of this epic landscape. And so that was something that inspired me. Another one was the great Hudson River school painter, Albert Bierstadt. And Bierstadt, his paintings, if you look closely at Hudson River School guys, they're recording light moving in a scene.
Yeah.
If you look closely, the sun is not in one position in those paintings. And there's a dimensionality in those paintings, and it's because light is moving. And so, what I've essentially done is I'm exploring this idea of, the way painters work, but I'm doing it in a very strict sort of regimen of based on time and capturing the changing of light. And we're working it on what I call a time vector. But that is enabling me to create a certain depth and a perception in a still photograph that we never could see before.
Something that came to mind when preparing for this show was some years ago, Andy Warhol did a movie of the Empire State Building where he set up a camera on the street, Empire, and he just photographed the building for 24 hours.
Right.
Now, it's the most boring movie in existence, and most people would say it's a picture of nothing, but in fact, he was doing exactly what you were doing in a certain sense of a static object, and it's not that there's nothing happening. Everything is happening. Light and texture are changing, clouds, everything's changing. You just don't see it, but in your photographs, it's the same concept squeezed into one frame.
Right. I think, many people have explored time, throughout history, and there's so many, dating back to the Renaissance, I've discovered, painters that were creating panels that they were changing time within the context of an actual painting. And so, this is a fascination, I think, with artists throughout history. And so I'm just, evolving it photographically, really. But I think that there's people describe my work, it's like looking at a movie in a still photograph. In a way. That's kind of a very interesting way to look at it as well.
But one thing to touch on that you just said is that one of the beauties of this work is that many of our collectors will tell us they love walking by the picture every day because they see something different every time they walk by it. And they love living with the work because it's always capturing their imagination and their interest. And I think that's, really a beautiful thing about the work, because the longer you stare at it, the more you see.
It is, what I'm doing is I just don't know how many people have ever studied a place as long as I do in a single day. So there's something about, although I'm not like shooting a year on one particular subject, I'm doing this intense study in one day. And, my camera's in a fixed position. And so I basically am at the mercy of whatever nature brings, right? Whether, I have no idea who's going to show up. I have no idea what the weather's going to be like. We try to do our homework, but in the end, I like to say I feel I like to have a certain level of unease when I work.
It's like doing this show, actually.
Chris
That's the way we approach it.
No, I'm sure.
Buck's exact phrase, I think.
There you go.
Yeah,
Unease comes up a lot on the show.
Do me a favor, and I hope the answer to this is yes, just to satisfy my own needs as a creative. Please tell me you had dud days when it just did not work out.
Yeah, I have. I mean, but
Thank you.
I will say that my percentage is pretty doggone high. I'm pretty lucky.
When you're there in the spot taking the photo, are you, I don't want to say pre-visualizing, but are you thinking the narrative through in for example, the people on the ground and what is this going? And then later in post, do you adjust the individuals on the ground or the animals in the case of nature photos too?
No, I really try to
narrative
be very
purposes, yeah.
strict to where things happen based on time. That's really important to me. So because when we're compositing these images, and I work with a brilliant retoucher who I've been I torture basically. But the idea really is critical that we in order to have an effect visually where you look at the work and it's seamless like that. If you're moving and change, you know what I mean, putting guys right and left in it never looks right. It just doesn't. You when you're in a space light-wise and grounded in reality, it has a certain look to it.
The one that I keep thinking back is, I guess it's tunnel view, and there's a skateboarder that's down in the left corner jumping. He's kind of caught in the middle of the jump. That happened.
Yeah, those
right?
are all. I mean, the
that
people
one
look
also, the guy throwing the baby up
baby
in the
up
air.
in the air.
Oh, yeah.
And people
it's-
always comment on that.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first saw the take, I was like,
My breath was taken away when I was watching him throw the baby up in the air.
bet.
I couldn't believe how high he was throwing that kid up in the air. But
Well,
those
how
are
high
all-
were you? He was trying
Yeah.
to.
Well, I'm
He had a drone
yeah,
on the
exactly.
kid's
I'm
head.
about 40 feet up. I'm literally doing that picture from the top of the actual tunnel, and I'm on a 45-degree. I can't even tell you how unbelievably challenging and difficult that photograph was to do.
Now,
wanna
by the way,
get-
that's an interesting thing. Here you were on a fixed position. You're on terra firma. Okay, a lot of these pictures were shot up in cherry pickers and cranes. You have to maintain a certain amount of stability. Not that you're dealing with pin registration here, because you do have a certain amount of liberties in post.
But
he's
it's
pretty
Not
much
really.
straight.
Not really. It's
Not
got to be
really.
pin registered. Pretty
Okay,
much,
so
yeah.
that said, you're
Yeah.
up there in a bucket with somebody else for over a day, hours. Okay, how do you maintain that stability? Because every time you're moving, you're repositioning.
well, that's
that-
why he loves that condor so
Yeah,
much.
I always go with these gigantic machines, not because I need to go 170 feet in the air, but because I look for the ballast. The weight of the machine gives me the stability that I need. So if I get anything more than a 10-mile-an-hour gust, I'm out of business.
So in other words, if FOBA
So-
made up crane, this is the crane.
This
they
is
would
the
make.
crane, right?
Okay.
But I would, I mean, the bigger the beast, the more I like it.
This
because it's
particular
about
crane has
stability.
outriggers on it, which gives it a tremendous amount of
Yeah.
stability. But
Okay.
there are times where we can't get that machine in. We just can't. And like on the inauguration, as an example.
Yeah,
we-
well, the inauguration, I mean, you hit on something. I was, we got special permission from the president himself at the time of Obama's inauguration, 2013. And where I was able to get a scissor lift in there. That's the only thing they'd let me use.
Because it had
And
to be pre-cleared.
It had to be pre-cleared.
Sure, yeah,
and
yeah.
so they got me this lift, and I begged the guy, I said, give me the best machine you have, like the most stable. I don't want something rickety. And we got there, and sure enough, it was as good a 50-foot scissor lift as you get, but scissor lifts are very unstable. So what happens is every time you shift your weight, literally, if I go from my left leg to my right leg, my horizon line would shift.
Sure.
So my assistant and I had to actually tape ourselves into position. And every exposure I made, I was literally in the exact same spot every time, because that was the only way I could guarantee that my horizon line wasn't going
So
to
you
change.
put tape footprints down, you stood on.
And I stood and I mimicked my
smart.
exact, and my even the weight of my arm, the way I was over the camera, the position, physically, my physical position was exactly in the same every exposure I
must
made.
take you a day
That's
to
10
get
hours
over.
of
That's a
work like that.
physical
Oh my
effort.
God,
I
it's
mean,
so
it must-
exhausting.
Yeah,
And-
people
and-
don't realize how physical it is. I mean,
yeah,
or
yeah.
I've been recently just did this geographic project on bird migration day to night, and 36 hours in a bird blind where you can't even turn on a white light. White light, they go. You sneeze, they leave. I mean, it's that kind of thing.
Can we
Speaking about
jump over
sneezing,
here?
you're up in a bucket for 20, 30 hours.
Let's not even go there.
All right,
I think
okay.
the
Let's
one
just say,
question
that
everybody
guy,
asks.
that guy who eats all those hot dogs, he has a routine. I've got mine.
Okay, all right, okay. Moving right along.
Can we jump back over here to the Flatiron image and kind of start with some production talk here?
Sure.
Because I know, I mean,
There's
from
so
the
much to talk
Serengeti
about here.
to Venice to the Flatiron and 23rd
It's
Street.
all, really months of preparation, honestly. And the Flatiron is one of my favorites because I did work with the gentleman from the mayor's office very closely on this. And as I mentioned earlier, he said, look, the only way I'm going to ever approve this is if we meet with the DOT. I said, okay. Now, Stephen and I have been working together for many years in the world of advertising, and I've done a lot of production with him before. So I knew what the DOT was. I knew the drill. And I've never really, you can just submit a permit to the DOT. I've never had to go down and meet them before. So I went down. It was in the midsummer, and I met with both the gentleman from the mayor's office and from the DOT. And we walked through it all, and I explained everything. I also had to have permission from two other sources. One was the pork chop, which is the bit of land right in front where all the blue umbrellas are, and then another set of permissions from the Flatiron building itself. And it was a little bit different than I might have to get today. But anyway, that being said, I got permission, and they said to me, here's the day you can shoot at 9/11. And I thought, oh, there's going to be nobody on the street because it was the 10th anniversary, and I thought everybody's going to be downtown, but I was too petrified, honestly, to say, do you think you could give me another date? Because I knew I was
the 12th.
But
pressing
then
the
she
buttons.
told me, and I said, Stephen, they're going to let us do it on 9/11. I go, oh my God, you're kidding me. That means we're going to get the memorial lights
The tribute of lights.
on Fifth Avenue. I said, I'm going to, then I knew instantly, I said, I'm going to do Fifth Avenue at night and Broadway at day. And that's how it happened. Yeah, literally. It was
So
like
they
a
gave
gift.
us the permission, and we had everything in place, and I had my parking monitor out the night before and putting up signs, and we were all prepared. It was a gorgeous day.
How big's the crew on a shot like this?
It's small. We can't. So what's interesting is we always have a PA with us on the ground, and we always have one assistant up in the air with Stephen and myself, or another production person on the ground. When he travels to India, for example, I usually don't go on those. Africa, I had production people there. I was there ahead of time with him scouting a bit, but so it varies. Anywhere from 4 to 5 is the max because it's just too long a day, and we can't shift people out in the middle because we really need the continuity. So on this, we had one of our assistants up with Stephen, and on this particular one, the driver of the truck
This is
said,
a funny story.
I have to go up there with him. That's the way we keep one guy on the ground watching the lift, and I got to go up with him. And I was like, look, you guys, you know us for 100 years. I don't think it's a good idea. You're not going to be able to come down. And he just
They
wasn't,
didn't grasp that
Yeah, he
idea.
wasn't getting it. And I was
didn't
like,
get,
all right.
The driver didn't really understand. I mean, come on, you're going to come down, right? We're sitting
And I
up
kept
there.
saying, no.
No lunch break.
So I'm
Yeah.
up there, and I'm like it's a perfect
And
day.
we're literally,
all this
we have
amazing stuff I'm getting.
and we have a pulley system. So
For
I would go out and
drinks
get
or
drinks
food.
and sandwiches, whatever he needs.
bucket,
Put it in
basically.
the bucket, and the bucket goes up. And I remember pulling the bucket up, and the guy goes, all right, I'm coming down now. And I'm like, I don't think so.
No, he said to me, he looked at me. What happens is
If you can't fit in the bucket, you ain't going anywhere.
So we got all this great stuff. I'm all set. I'm waiting the sunset. Now I'm literally just waiting for the memorial lights to come on. And he looks at me and he goes, "Okay, guys, I got to go to the bathroom, so we're gonna just go down for a few minutes, okay?" And I go, "No, you don't understand." He goes, "What do you mean? I got to go to the bathroom?" I said, "No." I said, "You see that? We have to get this picture of the lights." I said, "After I get the lights on, you're free to go down, but we
Which is
cannot
about
do this."
5 hours
I said,
later.
"I can offer you a bottle. I can offer." I said,
like, yeah, September
he was
11th, the
he's
sun
but
sets like
was
9:30.
I was
Sure.
I was at that moment almost ready to grab the keys and say, "We're not moving this thing," because I knew I had such a great photograph. I just
And
said,
the driver,
"There's no way we're going down."
His partner, who's sitting down on the ground, looks at me and he goes, "You're kidding, right?" I said, "No, I told you. You just weren't listening. No one comes down. Once he goes up, he's up."
So after this shoot, every other shoot we've ever done with them, they're like, "No problem, Stephen. You can go up
Go
by
up.
yourself."
Here the
They're
keys.
like, "Yeah, we'll control it from the ground." And they sit and they have their coffee in the car, and it's just me
Sleep,
and my
Are
you
you
sister.
know.
guys in constant communication? I mean,
Yes, we're on
yeah,
walkies all the time.
Yeah.
But it was really funny.
It was really funny.
Yeah.
But on this one also, there's just a lot of nuances because, first of all, the pork chop itself, the umbrellas are down, at night. And everyone was super nice and super helpful on this. But I ended up getting out there at, I think it was 3 a.m, and I had to run out and literally put up each one of those umbrellas myself.
Oh, wow.
Which is okay, and then, we had that little thing. And then we also had that particular day, Stephen was up and all of a sudden
There was a bomb scare.
bomb scare in in Madison Park.
So what happened was I'm 50 feet in the air, and all of a sudden it's like Godzilla is entering Madison Park. It's like people are fleeing.
Wow.
And you hear this announcement, please evacuate the park. Please evacuate the park. And all of a sudden, like this guy, like the Hurt Locker, Mr. Hurt Locker comes.
And I'm
in his
petrified.
full-on bomb suit.
Because I'm worrying they're going to say, you, get down.
He's 25 feet away from me. And my assistant and I are watching this. And no one, one amazing thing about being in a cherry picker over New York City, nobody looks up. Like, especially with today's technology, right? With everyone's iPhone and everything. And
probably
nobody
now,
looks.
With drones and stuff, it would probably be very different. But
No, nobody looks up. They just
right.
don't. So I was invisible, even to the police in a way. So they're clearing the streets, and I'm looking at my assistant and I get this Mr. Hurt Locker, and you see him bringing a suitcase. He's going into the park, and he takes this suitcase back in, and he's just outside my frame. Otherwise, it would have been in the picture. But I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, I think we're in the blast zone here. This is nuts. I have no idea that I'm even here.
And meantime, that driver's going, can I go down now? Can I go down now?
Yeah.
We were all extremely
Yeah,
nervous.
he was like, wait a second, this wasn't part of the agreement.
Wow. So follow up on that. The bomb. They cleared the
bomb.
And because it was 9/11, it was even more so.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, sure.
Even more
It was pretty crazy.
worrisome to everybody. And I kept thinking, oh my God, please just don't look up, because I figured as soon as they see him, they're going to be like down.
Yeah.
They didn't look up. They cleared out the park. They went through all the machinations, and then they went about their business.
day in
Everybody
New York
left
City.
and headed downtown. And we were sitting there. It was also just happened that Italy had just opened. So there was a line around the corner for gelato. There were a tremendous amount of people on the streets. It just ended up to be a magical, magical day. The weather was fantastic. And really the rest of it, I have to say, went off without a hitch. We were so fortunate. And in each one of them, there are always something happening, last minute changes. It is production heavy. Each one of these does take months. I can't tell you, Gramercy Park was one of the ones we did after that. And I had to go through a tremendous amount of permission gaining through the Gramercy Park Association, which we became friendly with. And each one of them brings its own nuances and its own problem solving. I think the beauty of it all is that because he's up there for so long, people who work with us really respect
it. I was going to say, what's the one thing that links everybody's eventual okay? You know what I mean? Their approval. Is it respect for the work?
I
are
think
they expecting a print at the end? Or
sometimes we do that. With Gramercy Park, we did do that. We made a contribution to the Gramercy Park Association so that they could auction it off and raise money for the fund, which worked out really well. Each one, as I say, has its own nuances, but I think in the end, they really respect the idea that he gets up there for 24 hours. We are very, very, very conscious of not stepping on anybody's toes and being very thoughtful about where we are and mindful of the people around us.
You act professionally.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
We do. Years of incredible advertising work has taught us that well. And I think that's been the beauty of it, and it was a real homage to the city when we first started the project. And in the mayor's office, really took it on and understood what we were doing, and we had the great fortune of getting permission to be up in Central Park on Bethesda Fountain. That one also had its own nuances and problems and permission granting, and that's a whole nother genre. And then we did Brooklyn Bridge Park. It took me 2 years to clear that. We went, I can't even tell you how many times we went down. We sent a scout down. We did it every which way from Sunday, and we ended up having a complete fluke in how we got the permission for it. And once we did it, and the guy who originally didn't want to give us permission because he thought we would be too intrusive within the park, because Stephen had to have the lift underneath the bridge.
I was 50 feet in the air for 18 hours.
Underneath the Manhattan Bridge.
Underneath the Manhattan Bridge. And the sound was
it was
the most,
deafening.
and people always ask me, what was the most challenging? My brain was just like having a shockwave. I couldn't even, if you'd asked me my name when I got down
You
after 18
feel
hours.
the sound up there.
It was like every time the B and the D
percussions and stuff. Oh, yes,
train
that's
would
right.
go across almost every 2 to 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And I had, like headsets on, Bose things and sound reducers, earplugs. Nothing mattered. It was just deafening.
It's assaulting. It actually assaults you.
It does, exactly. It's like
but
a
we
wave.
needed to be also have a base camp within the park. All the gear, everything that we needed around us. The lift was in the park. We had offered to go into the trash area. We offered to go on the street, but the prime area he really needed to be was still in the park.
I wanted to make a picture, Saturday in the park kind of feeling, this kind of, something that, harkens back to, again, some of the impressionists, the celebratory view. The work has really, for me, has always been the New York, especially, and where it sort of emerged from was I just love New York, and I just want to make photographs that make people feel the kind of love I feel when I look at the city and I think about the city.
When and how did it grow up as New York to Africa and everywhere else?
That was really interesting. I mean, it started with I did one of California, what really was a sister image to Coney Island. I wanted to photograph the Santa Monica Pier, and after that image, we then Chicago. There was an opportunity to go to Chicago, and I always loved the Cubs, and so I ended up. I'm a baseball fan, so I did this, and then of course I'm. If you look at my work, you'll see the evolution over the last 9 years. If you think about where I came from starting really my art as a documentary photographer, I did Ellis Island and Bethlehem Steel and some of these places, and then I went and started working into China. My work has always been captivated by history and memory in a way and time, and so I've been now melding all of those things, and now the newest Data Nights are really sort of, I think, fueled with social conscious issues that I'm very, very, driven by, whether it's rising seas or the birds and things like that.
Are all of the original ideas come from you, or are some of them suggested? And
I think that,
are they assignments?
No.
Yeah, I was going to say, who's footing the bill? Because this is expensive.
Oh my God,
it's really been a self-driven project.
Has it been?
Yeah,
okay.
It really has been. The interesting part of it is that when we went, one of our galleries, Peter Federman Gallery, when he started working with us doing New York, he said to Stephen, he goes, you got to go global with this. And I remember sitting there with him, and he said, I really feel like you need to go to London, to Paris, Jerusalem. And I remember we walked out of the gallery, and I looked at Stephen, and I said, oh my God. And he said to me, I think he's right. I think we got to go global with this.
We had an opportunity. I wanted to go to Israel, and I'd never been to Israel, and so I decided to do this picture of the Western Wall, and it was just a remarkable kind of an experience for me for my first time. And I'll share a little story. It was really amazing. My dad, when I grew up.
Before you get there, though, I mean, what happened was Stephen said, I want to shoot the Western Wall. We do a tremendous amount of research in the studio before we send the scout out, because it's too broad, and his vision is very particular about what he needs for the frame. So we start researching it, and one of our assistants says, my God, the Birkat Kohanim. Yes. And he looked at the pictures,
and I saw the picture and said, I have to shoot that, because there's an ocean of people there, a sea of humanity. I said, that's the photograph I need to make. Now I need to get on the highest and closest physical structure to the Western Wall. So I have this great scout, deeply religious man who...
And so, wait, let me just interject and just say that it takes a while for us to find the right scout there. This is important.
Right, okay.
They're asking about
in
production.
Israel, everybody's a scout.
Okay,
right.
so
Betty found the scout.
We found this guy who was fantastic, who had done work in the field before, and it took him 3 months of literally sending us photographs, knocking on every door in the call.
I knew roughly what building I wanted, because I do a lot of using Google Earth, and so I knew roughly where I needed to be based on altitude and physical structures, and then he had to get access into those areas, and that's what took so much time. And we got the permission, we got it cleared. We literally had to get all our gear in by about 1 o'clock in the morning. We moved in. At about 3 o'clock in the morning, my camera was already in set position. I was on this rooftop. Couldn't believe the view I had. It was kind of, all I could do was imagine like going up every morning and having coffee and looking at this view. From this vantage point in my photograph, you see all of religion in the Western world.
Yes.
So we're in the Kotel. That was the word I was looking for.
Yes.
We were in the Kotel, and we had a private rooftop, and the gentleman who owned the apartment wasn't using the apartment. He rented it out every so often, so it was empty, which was great, because we got to we were able to get down into the apartment, keep some of our gear there, use the bathroom, and
we had a little bit
of base camp.
Production elements. Yeah.
But the security was insane, and we needed to get there that early in the morning. We had police escort.
Oh, it was as extreme as anything you'd see during 9/11 or anything like that. So it was really tight. We got there, setting up the camera, everything's set, and about 3:30 in the morning, my scout who we've become friendly with, and he looks at me and he goes, Wilkes, he goes, are you Jewish? And I go, yeah, I am. He goes, do you have any idea what this day is about? And I go, no. And when I was a kid, my dad used to say to me, Stephen, you're what's considered a high priest. I go, does that mean I still got to go to Hebrew school? He goes, yes, yes, you do. So I used to have this thing. He says, we're a Kohen. You're a Kohen. We're Kohens. So I'm like, wow, okay. So fast forward, I'm having this conversation. I said, yeah, I'm Jewish. He says, you know what this day's about? I go, just a day that I guess especially everybody comes to pray at the wall. He goes, no, this is the day that all the Kohanim come to bless everyone. And my mouth is agape, and he goes, are you a Kohen? I go, yeah. He says, do you realize you're here today with all your brethren to bless everybody that's physically in this place?
That's intense.
So that was really intense.
And by the way, it was horrible weather leading up to that day. We were
so lucky.
Flipping. It was completely
We were
overcast.
so lucky.
Have you had to call off some shoots because of weather?
We've never done it.
No, we've been really fortunate. I mean, the shoots that haven't worked, when you asked earlier, I did a picture of the Grand Canyon. The first one I shot from, it was on actually the Indian land, and there's a very famous Japanese architect who created this, it looks like a gigantic magnet that's clear. It's a walkway that literally floats over the canyon. Mm-hmm. And I thought, wouldn't that be cool? That'll be my human narrative, people walking on this abstract, this clear sort of horseshoe in the middle of the Grand Canyon. And I did this photograph. I spent literally 26 hours photographing from this place. And when I looked at the image and I roughed it in, I realized that the actual architecture overpowered the Grand Canyon. And so I realized that's not the photograph I want to make. I wanted to, I don't want to the Grand Canyon is the thing that I'm trying to capture. And I wanted to somehow contextualize humanity in a way with it that was much more harmonious than allowing like this architecture to overpower.
Every shot start at dawn?
Oh yeah, and before pre-dawn actually, pre-dawn. And there's sometimes that I actually get to a location in daylight where I have to set up in daylight because it's too difficult to actually access at night. So like an example, when I was in the Falkland Islands, I started. I almost do reverse. I shoot
Malvinas.
Sorry, the Malvinas.
I'm married to an Argentine.
Yes, Malvinas. No, thank you. I'm used to on Facebook. On Instagram, I have to hashtag both, so I don't get hate mail from. Yeah, exactly. It's Malvinas, depending on your persuasion.
Sure.
And so I had this experience where the physicality of just getting to the location was so difficult. We had to actually get out there in the early afternoon and then work a sort of a reverse schedule.
Well, it really doesn't matter at the end of the day when you really start.
No, it's 24 hours from beginning to end. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think when we were waiting for moonrise, I mean that has a great effect.
Yeah.
I mean, then it does really matter.
Sure.
Because,
yeah. That's why when people hear, why are you shooting 36 hours? Usually it's because of moonlight. I'm trying to get, when I started moving the work into from the National Park series that I did, I started to realize that, how do you capture night? The only way is there is no light in a national park, right, other than moonlight. So, sometimes you can be shooting and you get your normal 12 hours or whatever it is, 16 hours, but you know what? But for the time of the moon, you get up high enough for it to light El Capitan, which is what was happening in that first picture I did of Yosemite in the national park. I spent God knows how many hours waiting for that event to happen where the angle of light would hit it just the right way. So as the work has evolved, so have the challenges in a way.
How many do you do a year, or how often do you do
It really depends. I think when we first started, we were doing, 2 or 3, balancing it between a lot of our commercial and editorial commitments. And we were moving along. And then Stephen signed a contract with Toshin, and we had 35 at the time, and we needed to add a substantial amount to finish off the project for the book. And for 2 years, really, I would say
I've done more in the last 2 years than, it's almost Herculean.
How often does it, and it must, because of the fact that this is so labor and time intensive. Are there times when you're sitting up there in that bucket saying to myself, you know what? I think this is played. I think I've done it. Hey,
I don't think it's
what
at
point
that
did I
time.
prove my
No,
point?
I don't.
No,
I-
it's always on the back end. It's the
what-
edit.
It's the
where
edit.
he's
The
like,
edit is
"Oh."
a torture. But I was very, very. My heart was warmed reading a great book on Da Vinci, and it describes procrastination as this beautiful thing that it actually is not procrastinating. It's just that for creatives, you're working through it. And I keep explaining that to my wife, that she keeps saying, why aren't you editing? Why aren't you editing? Why aren't you editing? She's always screaming at me. I'm never editing fast enough and I'm like, no, I am editing. It's actually in my head, and I'm thinking about it and the relationship of it and where I'm going to go with it. And, I'm telling stories, right? And I'm also reliving my memory. So, that's what photographs do, right? I mean, they think they keep our memories alive in a way. And so when you experience the things that I experience when I spend 24 hours looking at a scene, just studying a place, it informs you in a way that's very different than almost anything I've ever experienced. And I think one of the great joys for me personally has been when people stand in front of my prints and they experience it the way I did. And, we've found it fascinating the way people actually spend time looking at my pictures. They don't just glance at my work.
Oh, no.
There's a way, that there's something
think-
about the time that I put in that comes out. In a way.
Well, it's a perfect example of that, of all of this, is that we had the great fortune to be commissioned by the United States Embassy in Canada and the National Gallery in Canada to create a day-to-night of the Canada 150, which was last summer. And it was on July 5th, I want to say, or July 2nd. I can't remember the exact date. And we knew we had to shoot that day. And we had months, almost a year of preparation getting into this. And at the last month or two before, we found that the Royals were coming, which changed where we could shoot from because, they have to have so much security, et cetera, et cetera. And we were scouting with the team from the National Gallery who were helping us. And we had a fabulous team there. And anyway, we settle on this location and we get to Ottawa and it is pouring. And I mean pouring. And Canada 150 is going on whether it's pouring or not. And the picture reflects the morning of rain and umbrellas and incredible ponchos. And we're sitting out there, and they had built this structure for him to shoot off on the roof. And luckily, there was an empty office building below because he couldn't have shot from the roof no matter what because there was so much rain. And he shot through the entire day into the night. The fireworks weren't off until I think 10:30 that night. 11. And we shoot it. And it ended up, we knew we had the picture because we had this incredible break of light during the middle of the day, et cetera.
It looked like a Hudson River School painting, the sunset. It was just spectacular.
But the incredible thing was that after we made the picture and we presented it to the museum and to the people of Canada, the next day we were at the National Gallery and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his wife Sophie showed up, just completely coincidental. And we were we got to know the ambassadors from the U.S. of Canada, Bruce and Vicky Heyman, and Vicky's there, and she says to Stephen, "Oh my God, you got to come here." And she says, "I want to introduce you to Prime Minister Trudeau."
I'm getting a tour, literally. One of the curators is giving me a tour. She goes, "Stephen, someone would like to meet you," and it's literally Justin Trudeau and his wife.
And he brings Stephen,
and he just came over to me and he looked at me and he said, "I can't tell you how unbelievable that photograph is." And he said to me, the most touching thing was, he said, every single memory of that day is in my memory of that day is in your photograph.
That's powerful.
And that was incredible. And that touches upon what you were just saying, that people.
Then I said, "Oh my God, that's the ultimate compliment."
Right, the ultimate
Well, that makes it
compliment.
interesting when it is an event and a one-day thing where other people are sharing it,
Sure.
so they can
Sure.
reflect on it in
Exactly.
the same way.
And that that's been thematic. When he can capture
Have
a
all the
historical
photos
event.
been seen, or are there still some that
There's still a few.
That have not been seen.
yet?
We had
Yeah.
the incredible foresight, potentially, or good fortune to be allowed to do one of Red Square. And that one is still being worked on.
Yeah.
And that was, an incredible.
I don't know if I could do now, but
I doubt we'd get permission
I
right
don't think
now.
we'd get permission now.
Okay. We're going to take a short break, and we come back. We're going to be talking about the Serengeti. Stay tuned.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of the B&H Photography Podcast. Send us a tweet at BHPhotoVideo, #BHPhotoPodcast.
for Serengeti, I started working with a team out of Tanzania, my God, like in September, and we didn't shoot the picture till March. It took that long. Everything moves at a snail's pace there. The amount of production needed to get in there and to figure out how to get everything in there and what we needed and the permissions, it's very, very, very time consuming. And what happened was we were going together prior to the shoot to Africa and to Tanzania. We went together and we were supposed to meet the production team the day we got there and hand off some of the equipment and the hard drives and just to be prepared. And at the last minute, they called me. They're like, "Oh, sorry, we're not going to show up today." I'm like, "What?" Could not believe it. He's like, "Yeah, no, we can't make it. We'll catch you at the end." So the whole time we were there together, I had my heart in my mouth, worrying, and we had a sense of where he wanted to go, and we were pre-scouting before he even met the team because the scouting photographs that they were sending us just weren't really what he wanted. And the last day that we were together there, our assistants were traveling in to meet him. I was coming back to the States, and we get to this literally airstrip that is just a dirt road, and our plane lands, and they're supposed to be waiting for him there, and there's nobody there. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so
She's
not
so
how I
worried.
run a production. Like,
Where are
we
they?
are like clockwork. I'm like, oh my God. And I can't even get to them because the cell phones just are so dismal. And he's like, don't worry, they'll show up. I'm like, I don't know. He's like, they'll show up. So I end up leaving him alone on this airstrip. Literally, I think there was a hut.
With my 8 cases of equipment.
Yeah, all the equipment, no assistants, nobody. And sure enough, they do end up showing up. And then what happens after that is just a real miracle. We had been to the Serengeti National Park. You can't go off-road there. And he said to our team over there, who had a lot of experience, which is why we hired them, and it wasn't cheap. It's expensive to work over there. Everything is black market, and there's just one of everything. And he said to them after scouting, like 3 or 4 days.
Well, there was basically I discovered the location through happenstance. It's like I was it was one late afternoon, and I noticed this watering hole, but I wasn't really drawn into it, to be honest, because it was just from the angle where you're actually in the park and you're driving, you don't see it in its entirety. You only see a fraction of it. But what I noticed was these zebras at sunset were coming out, and they looked like they'd been dipped in black chocolate. So they were, or oil. It was like they were glazed, and they were just beautiful. I've never seen anything quite like it. And in fact, it was almost there was a viscosity almost to the water. It was like almost like mercury. It had this kind of sheen to it. And I just started photographing them, and I was like, where are they coming from? What's going on? Like, where are they getting the sheen from? Because all I could think about was seeing them go in and then come out. And so I traced them. I followed them back into the actual watering hole that they were coming out of. And when I saw the watering hole, I was like, wait a second. I saw the relationship of where I was versus where the hole was, and then I saw the back end of it, and I realized if I could get to the opposite side from inside the park and shoot across, that I'd have this amazing view at sunset and everything. And so we got permission to drive off-road into the park.
Which is unheard of.
Unheard of. And I had a scaffolding built onto the actual truck, so it was like using speed rail. So it elevated me almost about 15 feet in the air. And then on top of that, I had a crocodile blind that was attached to it. So I was essentially invisible to the animals when we started to shoot. But we pulled up. I was scouting at this moment, so I only stood on the top of my truck. And when I looked at the view, I knew immediately this is the shot. This is definitely the shot. So then we had to get back, and we spent almost 4 or 5 days negotiating with the head of the national park.
Waiting for permission.
Waiting for permission.
Because they don't allow you to go in there for 24 hours.
No.
Just unheard of. The
Yeah,
animals,
because-
you can't, how do you protect yourself?
Not only that, it's really about the poaching. They
Yeah.
they don't want anybody driving in the park after sunset, so it's a very, very strict thing.
Guarded and
I needed to actually be set up, like I needed my truck in the situation all dialed in, like at 1 o'clock in the morning, so I could shoot the stars, and they agreed to it. We were able to do it. They said, we'll only allow you to do this. You have to camp out in our tents. So they allowed us to use the actual national, the Rangers tents. So we literally spent the night in the middle of the Serenara.
But we had a security guard with a rifle, and we also had a Maasai with a spear.
Yeah, well, let's just say
You got to keep
if I had known
your bases covered there.
if I had known what I know now, I don't know if I would have been. I don't think I would have slept at all, frankly. And I'm God knows if I probably would have ever stepped down from my rig, because when we pulled up that night to set up the camera, as the lights came across this watering hole, there were all these eyes lighting up. We immediately think of crocodiles, but they weren't crocodiles. They were hippopotamuses. So there's a whole family of hippos there. So after the fact, I realized that when a hippo, if you get between it and the water and its water, it will, likely go after you. And there's a 95% chance you're going to die if a hippo goes after you, which I didn't know they had that high of a kill rate.
You can't reason with them.
No. So and by the way, people think they're these lumbering animals. They're much closer to the dancing hippos that you used to see in the cartoons. That's how fast they can move.
By the way, we're talking about a photograph, and if you're listening to the show, if you just go online, you could find it very, very easily. But it's essentially a small watering hole. It's maybe 50, 60 feet across.
Yeah.
Maybe. Mm-hmm. And it's in the photograph, you have over the course of 24 hours, pretty much every animal species that came along to drink.
Yeah, it was extraordinary. I mean, one of the things I did
Noah's
was
Ark around a puddle.
It was essentially Noah's Ark. I kept waiting for him to, to drop the boat.
You have to talk about what happened when you were shut down.
Well, what happened was I set up the camera. We were there. We started taking photographs. It was 26 hours. I think I took 2 hours to stop to eat lunch. That was it. Otherwise, I was photographing the entire time. And what I witnessed it was truly, really biblical in a way. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. And it was kind of a life-changing experience because, I'm a dog lover. I love animals in general, but I've never witnessed anything quite like this. So all these species are sharing this watering hole, and I'm watching this over a 26-hour period, and you don't even hear them grunt at each other. There is absolutely it's like this idea that they're competitive in any way does not exist when it comes to the going into the water and sharing the water.
It's an equalizer.
It's an equalizer. The animals seem to truly understand that water is something everybody gets to share, and that whatever other problems you have with each other, you could pick that up after you leave the watering hole. But when it comes to the watering hole, everybody's on the same plane. It was astounding to watch, and it made me begin to understand that animal communication is something we don't really truly understand, and I started to really think about how my work might be able to evolve into capturing more of that idea of animal communication. And that's really how, the bird series got. It was based on Serengeti, and then I did a photograph in a place called Ropes and Bite where I captured, orca whales and the way they intersect with humanity in this magnificent place called the Bite.
When you're up there, are you? Well, I have two questions about that time there. How often are you pushing the shutter? And also, do you have a lot of great ideas when you're up there or about everything else that's going on, or are you so focused on what's going on there?
No, I'm just, I really try to live in the moment, so, you think about, as a photographer, I started as a street photographer, and I would, I can kind of smell a picture before it happens. And I think what I do is, although I'm in a very sort of controlled, set space, and my frame is very defined already, I am, just reacting to what my eye sees. So I'm literally just seeing things and reacting. I like to describe it as I'm a street photographer from 50 feet in the air. That's what I do. Not to say I don't have an idea of a picture, but I don't let my pre-visualization of something define what it is that I'm going to capture. I'm open. I've learned over the years that I want to somewhat be able to have this frame, but then I get lost within the frame. I want to get lost a little bit because that is what kind of drives my uneasiness a little bit, and so it makes me pay even more attention. And I tend to be very afraid of missing something. And like with the Serengeti shot, what Bette was mentioning was we shoot such large files that every 3 hours or so I have to clear my computer off just to capture, and to keep working fluidly. And so sometimes that involves like literally disconnecting, and it's a couple of minutes before I'm live again. And so there's always this moment of where I'm completely terrified that within those few minutes something
the shot's
going to happen.
Yes.
Like the lion's going to strike. Something's going to happen, especially when you're shooting wildlife. And so
or in Manhattan.
My assistant, or in Manhattan, true. and my assistant looks at me and he says, after 4 minutes, he goes, "You're live. You can start shooting again, Stephen." I'm like, thank God. I looked around. So I'm in I'm in a crocodile blind, right? And that's like this basically it's like a beige tent with a 20 by 36 window in it. And so I don't have really peripheral vision. I have to, in order to see what's coming on my edges, I actually have to lean my head out the window to look. And so I lean my head out, and literally, if you look at the photograph, you'll see a family of elephants marching across. That is the moment I see them. And it's like, I'm going, oh my God, literally I was shooting so fast, my assistant was cocking my shutter for me. I was just going, if you could motor drive a 4.5, I was motor driving. It was just so incredible. But to me, the most spectacular moment was this, when they just came across that center section, and the baby, the gesture of that baby was just, it was out of the Jungle Book. It was magical, And so my point being is you just never know when that stuff's going to happen. And I just felt like so blessed. I was so thankful that my assistant Chris got it finished and done, because 30 seconds later, I don't get that picture.
Not to get too far off the topic, but what camera are you using, camera and lens system?
So I work with a Linhof, large format camera.
And it's a digital back on it?
Digital back, a phase digital back, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
Phase 100 megapixel, yeah. So
time will go by where you won't be shooting. I mean, it sounds like while you're up there, you're like every other photographer, you're waiting for that moment. There's not like a set number of minutes
exactly.
or time.
No, there's nothing. I like I said, my eye moves with time, and certainly I'm creating naked plates based on time. And if there's transition, color and clouds,
your coverage,
different. I'm getting coverage based on my time transition. So that's always happening, and that's always in the back of my mind. But I live in the moment. Like I said, I'm a street shooter, so I'm reacting to what I see with my eye, and that's really what it's about. That's what people, when you look at the work, it's way more. This is not a time lapse where some mechanical mechanism is shooting pictures every 15 to 30 seconds or every minute. This is me seeing very specific moments throughout the day and the night, and that's why it is really an accurate representation of my memory of what I saw that day.
That comes through the photo, though. Even it's hard to put your finger on it when you're looking at the photo, but this idea does come through, I think.
Yeah, well, I think if you look closely enough and you see the moments, there are a lot of really cool moments in it. That's what's kind of fun about the work is, the joy to me is in the details, and the joy for me is bringing you into the picture. A lot of art, you need to stand back at 4 feet to take it in. My art doesn't work that way. You can stand back at 4 feet and take it in, but then I want you to come closer. I want you to come in. Come on in.
You have no choice.
Yeah, you have no choice. I want you to come inside, take a look. There's something for you to discover. And like Betty said, I mean, that's the great pleasure is when people who live with the work, say to me, Stephen, God, every day I wake up, I see something new. And that's what I love about art. I like art that, you can rediscover every time you look at it.
Can I ask this, and we've touched on it a bit, some of the work comes from assignments, others it's you guys decide you want to shoot it and you figure it out. I've heard you mention a grant.
Yes.
And Tashin. So there's a whole lot of players involved in funding this to some degree. And, And you sell prints also through the gallery.
Yeah, the gallery is what really, to be honest, my gallery sales is what really is how we feed it all back into the project.
Okay. Right.
So it's the print sales that really are able to. I've been very fortunate in that the work has. I have a really great collector base that is always excited about the new works that I'm doing, and they that enables me to go out and create more art. And that's really the way it works.
Going back to the grants, when Stephen was talking about it earlier, the initial grant and what I estimated was for 5 domestic bird migration shots. He ended up basically going around the world to do it. So the grant budget that was initially forthcoming did not even come close to covering what we needed to.
That was for coffee and snacks, basically.
The great thing is one of the exciting things for me as a photographer. You think of the Geographic is really this bastion of photojournalism, and I think when. I remember early on I showed my work to Sarah Lean, and she was very captivated with what I was doing. And the fact that the Geographic sort of recognized this and they were willing to embrace it is a really, for me, was really the ultimate compliment.
They're incredible partners.
They've been incredible partners because they see that photography is evolving, and they recognize that, and they see the power of storytelling that this concept brings to the medium, and the issues now that I'm beginning to explore, whether it's with the bird migration series, the idea that birds are we can learn so much from birds, and the old canary in the coal mine idea. Seeing these species, studying them the way I did, it's almost like a scientist. When I spend a day like that, I see the mating rituals, I see all the nuances, the way they teach their young how to fly. Everything is in my pictures, so it becomes a real way for your average viewer or a young kid who never thought twice about birds to suddenly have an experience with a species in a way that's really enlightening, and maybe they get excited about birding and realize the birds can teach us things. They can tell us what's coming before it actually happens.
When were the bird photos shot? And we
this
were
last year.
That was
Well,
all
in
over the last year.
2017.
Yeah.
And how many locations over the course of a year for the bird photos?
There were initially a total of 5.
Okay.
And then we ended up with 4 because we ended up having to go so far away.
And why was that?
Endure so much expense. So, Stephen can talk to this. We started scouting.
Yeah, we started
initially.
scouting. We started to scout. Initially, we were going to do 5 locations, and the 5 was we were going to go to Las Malvinas, the Falkland Islands, and shoot the black-browed albatross. And then from there, we were going to Nebraska and on the Platte River, shooting the sandhill crane migration. And then after that, we were going to go to the Yucatan.
But there was
that
another
was the
one.
flamingos, and then we were doing Panama. We ended up. I did a lot of research, and we thought, okay, Yucatan is going to be great. Rio Largatos. There's this incredible nesting area where the flamingos come
It's a
in.
sanctuary.
It's a sanctuary, and so we had it all lined up. Spent about 7 months. I had a scout there, a producer, the whole thing. We worked out everything with the national park, and then 2 weeks, literally, before I was supposed to get on the plane and go and begin to start shooting, I get an update, and my producer calls me. He goes, "Stephen, you're not going to believe this, but I just got off the phone with the scientists, and the birds are not here." And I go, "What do you mean they're not?" He goes, "Well, they're not nesting where they normally nest." And so that doesn't work for me. I got to know that the birds were going to be there. And so I called my editor, Kathy Moran at the Geographic, who was just fantastic on this project. And we started brainstorming and realized that, okay, let's just, if they're not there, they're not there. Let's figure out where we can catch them. And so we started looking at Africa and an area specifically called Lake Bogoria. And they have a huge population there. But the thing is, they don't nest there. So again, that created a new challenge for me. Could I actually be lucky enough to capture them as time changes an entire day without them, having this giant, move? Because when they have their babies with them, they tend to stay there, right? So we went for Bogoria. I found a great local scout, and basically I heard the numbers were great. We got there, and something happened. Climate change affected this picture too. So we get there, and the first night there's a massive thunderstorm, and I find out that over the last 5 weeks, this is the dead of dry season, they've been having massive rains. And we get out in the morning to scout for the first time, and I see all the hills have this almost sea green color, like spring. And I notice there's this almost a freshwater river in the foreground of the lake that's just coming off the side of where I was standing. And I started having this conversation, and I see the birds are coming into it, and they're bathing themselves. So it turns out lesser flamingos, they love feeding in this alkaline, rich, nutrient-rich water. But in terms of bathing, they love fresh water. And so I looked at the situation, and they were saying to me, "This has been going on every single night, Steve. We get a thunderstorm around 9:30 at night with lightning and everything." I go, "Okay, so if that follows, then this freshwater stream should be here over the next 2-3 days." And so what I decided to do was I built a 30-foot blind. And this is crazy, but we actually had it brought in from Dubai, if you can believe that, because they didn't happen to have that in this area of Africa. So, and we literally had it wrapped with fabric, and I climbed into it, and I built it right on the edge of the fresh water, hoping that the birds would ignore me and want the fresh water enough to continue to bathe there. And I guessed right, they did.
You've been charmed.
Yeah, that's what my sister
Every
says.
20 minutes you're going, boy, again, he's gotten charmed.
I got lucky.
And did you find out why the birds never showed to Mexico? Was there or what happened?
We never got a confirmation, but essentially there has to be a certain temperature of the water. The water has to be a certain height in terms of for them to nest. So if there's too much water, they can't create their nests. It's almost like the nests get drowned. So it affects the young. So I think that's what it probably was. It led to. It was something to do with either temperature or water, or sea level.
Over the course of this series, are there any kind of major technical advances or changes that have improved the photography?
That was a big question
or-
I had. Well,
Yeah.
how long the first shot on the High Line was taken? How long ago?
Well, that was with I think it was a 37 megapixel
40,
back,
37 or 40, yeah.
40 megapixel back. So now I'm using 100 megapixel back. So to answer your question,
That's
it's
the
a
big
great
change,
question.
yeah.
It's
We're no longer measuring time in years, but by pixel count.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, the thing is what I feel like a writer who suddenly had a thesaurus handed to him, and I've learned all these new words. It is technology, and in particular, the size of the file size is, I started, maybe it was, I was shooting 2.25 film. Now I'm shooting almost 11 by 14 film, and that is an powerful way to be able, suddenly what was insignificant in my early work is now significant. So as a storyteller, I love the fact that I have that much more information to work with. And I think one of the things that I'm most interested in is when you see my prints in person, I'm trying to create a visceral experience for you. I want you almost to look at my work as a window, like you're standing there. It's as if I'm trying to change. I'm really, really interested in the way the eye sees. And so part of the way I photograph now is to try to almost replicate the way the human eye sees when you see a big, big print like that. So from a perception standpoint, your peripheral vision, the way your eye moves through a lot of my work, feels like you're there in a sense, right? And that's what I'm really interested in. So for me, it's very exciting. The larger, the more and more megapixels I have, the closer I get to realizing what I consider is the human experience of seeing.
So that aside, though, what about the post-production part of it?
Well, that creates more problems on the post side.
That
That's the problem.
has not changed.
The backs are doing great. The problem is the optics
File
have to
size.
grow, and the file size, and the other thing is that the time it takes to layer this type of huge data together. So we have a funny line with my retoucher where it's always that whenever I make a change, I call her up and I go, "Time to go out for coffee." That's the cue, because it's 20 minutes on the fastest computer to open one
the
of
file.
my files. Yeah,
Now,
20 minutes.
Your retoucher is in the studio with you when you're working, or are you guys in separate
We
locations?
work.
They work
We work
remotely.
remotely. Yeah. So, but
Okay.
I have this wonderful program that I'm able to work simultaneously with her anywhere in the world.
She used to come up to the studio a lot and work with us and work with Steven,
But now
one-on-one.
we work. It's as if I'm sitting next to her. She can share my screen. I can share her screen.
What program is this
It's
that you're
called
using?
Join Me. Yeah. It's
Join Me,
Join
okay.
Me. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can we talk post-production now? Can you just kind of maybe walk us through, if that's possible, from the images are shot, they're collected, and go?
Well, the post work, it starts with me editing. That can take almost a month, to be honest.
Well, it starts before
pulling-
that. I mean, first we
well-
get back to the studio, and the assistants have to download everything, and
Yeah, well,
you know,
that's
Yeah.
that's
obvious.
obvious, but still, it's time consuming because there's a huge amount.
The data, I mean,
of data.
the organization of the data is huge, and then we have to we edit now in Capture One, and I basically, because my workflow is such that I like to actually parallel as much of my experience when I'm actually shooting, where if we start changing and adding different software and so on and so forth. The other thing I do is I actually create a time lapse
Right, and he
as a
uses
study
that.
guide. And so my time lapse, what that does for me is it's not used for any imaging. What it's used is strictly for me to study time.
It's a reference.
It's a
It's the
reference
reference,
guide.
it's
I
his
see
guide.
how the light moved. I see how things changed.
So while you're working, you have a separate camera doing a time lapse of everything. Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And so that enables me to really see how light is moving through the scene. And that becomes a great tool for me in terms of visual reference of how I'm going to decide where day begins and night ends, and how time is going to move through my photograph. So, and then like I said, we'll spend. The thing people have to understand is that when you see my work, there's all this micro detail. Well, I capture very specific moments, but because my scenes are so broad in terms of the information in each photograph, that there may be 5 or 10 or 15 other great moments that happened that I wasn't even aware of. So I get to I have to rediscover my work when I edit. So it's not just the marked frame.
You have to visually
I have
scan
to scan
each frame.
yeah. And so you're doing that at 100%. And just imagine the time to render and all that stuff. You can realize why it takes a month to edit. And then all the moments are based on time, and they get, I mark them, they get circled, and then I sit down with my retoucher, and I create the master plates. I choose the frames that I feel the best skies, the transition based on time, and then we build the master plate together. And once that plate is built, then it comes down to, okay, my best and most favorite moments based on time get seamlessly blended into the image, and that's how it works. The post side can anywhere from 3 to 4 months. I have a team of assistants, current assistants, and old assistants that I still work with. So I have almost 10 pair of eyes go through the file through its complete gestation.
One file can have 28 iterations.
Yeah, 28 to 30 iterations easily, before we even print. And then we make these huge Epson prints, and then we rip them apart. You know what I mean? Like it's constantly being
and then
finalized
after we
and
print it in the studio and rip them apart,
refined.
He'll sign off on the final file. We'll give it to our
master printer.
He'll print it, and then we go through another.
That can take 2 weeks,
2 to 3 weeks,
2 to 3 weeks,
sometimes longer,
because color is so critical in my work. So if you're 0.5 yellow or red in my images, it changes the whole narrative. So color is really, really important. Creating a harmony between day and night, and that's what the other thing people don't really realize is how challenging that is. And, I'm really bringing together these two very discordant worlds in a way where visually, you just are drawn to the image, right?
They meld together without being jarring.
Yes, exactly.
And is that the hardest in it?
That's the hardest thing. Absolutely, that's the hardest part.
Now, you simplified this process a little bit in some of your city shots because, like, I know the Times Square, you use the side of the streets that are in shadow as your night.
That's right.
And
Times
your
Square,
daylight was daylight.
There are 2 images that I've actually checkerboarded time. So, and those are the only 2 I've done it with. And it's because in New York, when you think of Times Square, it's a canyon. Night is in the shadow of that picture, and day is in the sunlight.
Exactly.
Right? So it's checkerboarded. So there's no like normal arc to it, and that's because Times Square sunlight comes in spots. And when I was looking at it, it made sense, and I thought, wow, that could be really cool. I'll checkerboard time
and save 2 months.
Exactly. Well, and what people don't know about that picture was. That picture was shot in the middle of August or July, I think. And I was shooting from on top of one of those great signs in Times Square. Yeah. So I was kind of harnessed in on one of those signs. And there was a bomb scare.
Another one.
Now, everybody looks at that picture and go, how the hell does he create a naked plate in that picture? Well, guess what? At about 5:30 at night, the police come out and they grab. If you look at Times Square, they have these railings that are always on the side, and it looks like it's for for various events. The police grabbed the railings and literally started moving people, pushing them to the side, and they cleared the entire streets. So imagine in 3 minutes, all of Times Square was empty.
Betty, how'd you get the cops to do that?
I'm telling you, everybody thinks, wait a second, Stephen, did you phone that in? I said, I promise you I didn't phone it in. But I'm watching this with my assistant, and we look at each other, and I go, this might become a news event. This is crazy. And then I'm thinking, wait a second, I got to keep shooting because it was like this unbelievable thing because I was able to get all these photographs with no people in my scene. So it really made for the post side to be a lot easier than it would have been otherwise. So, but yeah, it was pretty crazy.
You got the naked cowboy in there.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So when you make the edit, you said it's about 50 images?
On average, 50 images is what we generally use. Right. And like I said, it's about 3 to 4 months of post work to finish it.
And are you shooting other things while you're doing this?
I'm a relentless photographer. Like I actually have other cameras that I'll be shooting with my main camera and I'm seeing stuff. But every so often I'll be like, oh, that's really cool. And so I have I'm out there with my Nikon or we're just grabbing stuff.
What phone do you use?
I kind of want to ask maybe a cheesy interview question. And you do nature. You're a fine art photographer. you've talked about street photography. In your heart of hearts, what kind of photographer are you? Or do you like to put that label on?
That's a good question.
I just love looking, I love seeing things. And so I've never allowed, it's not about necessarily what I see. It's just the act of seeing that I love so much. I think it's the excitement of discovery for me. That's what photography is to me. I mean, I started when I took pictures through a microscope when I was 12. And so there was a draw to this idea that I was seeing something new for the first time. And I think it's just evolved into a constant sense of curiosity. And so I guess, it really, everybody says, well, you shoot this, you shoot that. And in the end, I really just think I like looking at things that excite me. And I think for me, the ultimate is when I get to show you something and hopefully you get as excited as I was when I saw it, So it's that idea of sharing. I think that's the beauty of photography. I think that's kind of the exciting thing even about like Instagram today is the idea that you could just share the way you see something,
Yeah,
and
sure.
and people have it, everybody can see things, but most people just don't look, and then that's really a great gift. And something I learned, I have my mentor is Jay Maisel. I've been working on a documentary on Jay over the last couple of years. I've been doing it. And, that's such an important part of some of the lessons that he imparted with me in terms of the idea of just looking. We all got to look. Take the time to look.
Now, no doubt you're going to be taking many more wonderful photographs in the future. Do you think you'd be able to come up with a project as interesting and as, I hate to use the word interesting, but as complex technically as this? Because this is more than just going out and taking great pictures.
Yeah.
This is an awesome undertaking and a process.
Yeah, to be honest with you, this is probably as complicated as anything I could have ever created. I like to say to people, it's essentially, my primordial soup of photography. It's everything I love about the medium of photography. Like you asked me, what do you like to? Well, if you think about day to night, I've kind of poured everything in. It's all in there. Yeah. Everything's in there.
Yeah,
what isn't in there that I could possibly want or need to have.
Is there a fashion model in what's in there? I don't know.
Listen, there's even, who knows? Maybe there's always something going on. I also tend to get a lot of brides also, so, that's always a funny element in my pictures. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, by nature, I'm sort of, I have this kind of right brain, left brain type thing. So I'm always interested in new technology and things that are evolving. And, so I don't know. I don't know where the next opportunity will come. Now I'm actually exploring the idea of, using time and connecting to rising seas. That's my next big project that I'm working on, and potentially how do we create an experience for people to understand what the future is going to actually look like. So that's going to be a very exciting new body of work that I'm just beginning on.
Well, Stephen, I said up front, I've long been a fan of your work. You take the craft seriously and you push it to places where no one else has ever been. And it's just great following your work. It's wonderful having you guys here.
Thank
Betty,
you.
pleasure having you here as
Thank
well.
you so much.
And we
My
can't
better
appreciate-
half. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're in trouble without her. No two ways
No
about
question about it.
it. Okay.
I'd be out on the
Definitely.
street. Yeah.
If folks want to see more of your work, where should they go to take a look?
Well, certainly if you're, based on the East Coast in New York, please go to Bryce Wolkowitz Gallery. He always has Stephen's work up. And the museum show, National Geographic in Washington, D.C. is up through the end of April.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
show,
please
yeah.
check that out because we've got the bird images are 12 feet long. That's how
Oh, wow,
long the
wow.
prints
That's
are.
awesome.
So,
and it's really an experiential.
The current issue of National Geographic has this migratory
the March
birds,
issue. Yes.
And this is at the National Geographic Museum in Washington.
In
in
DC.
Washington,
All
D.C.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's up till the 29th of April, as Betty said.
And we have a book coming up,
Yes.
which is going to be published by Taschen
Yes.
and out.
When's that coming out?
We're scheduled for the fall. Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm getting a copy. All right, another great show. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Betty.
Thank you for having us.
And thank
for
you
having
to
us.
our listeners. If you're not a subscriber, go to wherever you have to go to. Where are we going now these days? We're going to iTunes. We're going to Apple Podcasts. All the places where you could sign up. You know all the places. I repeat them all the time. So that said, on behalf of John, Jason, and myself, thank you so much for joining us today.